Welcome back to the BookEnds YouTube channel. If you watched our video last week, then you probably knew this video was coming because we mentioned it. But today we're talking about what to consider in negotiations besides the money. So now the
Yeah,
money's very important.
understandably, all the attention when it comes to contract negotiations and sort of after the deal is the advance. It's all about the advance. That's all anybody cares about, really.
And the advance is like the buzz, the media buzz, right? Like this sold in 7 figures. This
Yeah.
22-year-old author got 600,000. That's like what people kind of glob onto for every book deal.
Yeah, but it's just a fraction of what we as agents work with our authors to consider when accepting a deal. Before we launch into this, I know we're going to talk about, but we're going to talk about a lot of different things you might want to consider here, but also keep in mind that not all of these will, if you're not in a competitive situation, a lot of these are just, they are what they are, but also a lot of them are, they are what they are. Don't overthink each and every thing we're going to present to you today. At the end of the day, it is sort of a gut and how you feel about it. And a lot of times, if you have a really big advance against a much smaller advance, then it can just be a no-brainer. But, we want to talk about all the things that might come up in conversation with your agent or that your agent is thinking about when doing the negotiations.
And there are 2 things I want to say. The first is that your advance does not equal a successful book. So your advance is not the only thing. There are so many things we're going to go through today, but just beyond these points too, just because you have a high advance does not mean you're going to be successful. Just because you have a low advance does not mean you're going to be less successful or that your publisher is going to be less invested in you. That's the
And
first.
there are a bajillion examples of both those situations, but also you don't have to start your career with a giant advance to be successful.
Right.
Most of the most successful authors that you think of that you want to position your career after, that you're looking at and going, I want a career like that, started out with some pretty low advances.
Yes. The second thing that I want to share, especially before we start getting into this list, is that you're not going to get the best of every one of these categories.
No.
Every deal, and Jessica says this often, I think probably I said it on the channel before, but a strong negotiation is when both parties come away having given something up, having gotten something. So all of these categories that we're talking about are all of these, things about the publisher. They're not going to be 100% perfect. That does not mean it's not a great deal. Does not mean it's not the best deal for you. So that's something to keep in mind. But when we're going through all this, there's a lot we're going to talk about, both in the deal terms, but also in the working relationship with the publisher and the publisher reputation, all of that. Not everything is going to be 1,000,000% the best thing that ever happened to you. Like there's give and take in every working relationship.
And
So
most of it is just knowing what you should be thinking about beyond the advance. And also having an understanding of when your agent calls you and is discussing some of these things, you have sort of working knowledge of it.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's jump right into it. So the first, and this is not going in order because we never go in order. We're not good.
There is no order.
There's no order. Okay, the first thing is editorial vision. This is something a lot more common. I don't know if you're experiencing this too, but it's a lot more common for editors to hop on the call lately before they make an offer, just to make sure they're on the same page as the author with some revisions. So it's often that authors will be able to consider the publisher and that specific editor's editorial vision for the book before even receiving an offer, before even accepting a deal. And that is, in my opinion, something very important to consider because you want a book at the end of this process that you're happy with, that you're proud of, that you love. And if this editorial vision takes you away from that in a way that's like irreconcilable for you, it's not worth it.
Yeah, and you might not even get on a call. Sometimes the editor will send over the offer via email and list out some things they want the author to consider. Would the author consider this? Or we envision this as, we know you pitched this as romance, but we envision it as women's fiction. Here's the comps we're using, that sort of thing that can give you an idea. And I have definitely gotten offers from publishers where the editorial vision of one was very different than the other. And it was the one that the author most aligned with that we ended up going with, because at the end of the day, that's probably even more important than the advance, because if you really can't see, it's not even agree, if you can't see your book in the same way the editor can, it might be really hard for you to write it.
Yeah, and we have these same conversations when you're trying to decide between agents too. It's really
Yeah.
the same principle, except there's money attached to this one,
Yeah.
which can sometimes make it murkier and harder to decipher whether you're feeling good about it. But it's important to sit with that.
But it also doesn't mean it's not a negotiation point. There's
Right.
nothing saying that you can't go back, or your agent can't go back to the editor and say, hey, you had said this, that's not exactly the author's vision. We would sort of counter with this idea. And a lot of times the editor's like, no, that would be great. We love that.
Yeah, everything is
So
negotiable.
everything is negotiable.
Yeah. Okay, the second thing to consider is the publisher reputation, and we broke this down to two categories. So the first one is on the business side. What is the contract language like? What are they like to negotiate with? What is the royalty department like? How this is an important one for me,
Got some pet
especially.
peeves on that one.
Yeah, we have a lot of them. The royalty department, are you going to spend the next 10 years of your book's life hunting down a royalty statement, hunting down your next check? There are publishers where that's the case, the truth of the matter. But also things like, what do they like to work with? Are they super collaborative? Do they tend to just do the thing and then bring you a final product? That happens, especially in the picture book. There are editors who will keep you collaborative throughout the whole process. There are editors who will go off and find an illustrator and then tell you, here you go, or send you, here you go, here's the final art. So all of that is worth considering. And that's also why you have an agent, to know these things, and your agency in general. But that is something that your agent will be keeping in mind and probably discussing with you, especially if you have multiple offers.
Yep. No, definitely.
The flip side of that, oh, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go on. I got distracted. You continue.
The flip side of that is maybe on the more creative side of things, the publisher's reputation. In a lot of ways, that's their list, right? Like, what are the books that they're publishing? Who are the authors that they're publishing? What have you liked them? Did you not like them? What are the covers looking like? What does the cover copy sound like? All of those things on the creative side. Are they a dream publisher for you? And we have a video forthcoming about this. What is a dream publisher? How to know if they're right for you? But so watch that. But like, is this someone who's, publishing vision, whose, I guess their career, their mission aligns with you in your book and what you want this book to be? That's important to consider.
Yeah, the first part of reputation, which is the contract language and royalties, there's information your agent will probably just say to you, listen, just heads up, this is something that's always in their contract that drives us nuts. But either it's not that big of a deal, or we'll fight it, but you should know that this is probably what that's going to say ahead of time, or the royalties are always late, or whatever it is. The second piece of it, the books, the covers, the cover copy, all of those things, that's you.
Yeah.
That's just what you have learned about the publisher. It does not mean that you now need to go and research every publisher so that you have a solid idea of all of it. You do not have to.
No.
But a lot of times authors will come to us and they have an idea because they look at their bookshelves and they look at the books they're reading that are similar to the one they're writing, and they're like, wow, they're all from this one publisher. All my favorites are from this one publisher. If that's the case, then that's good for you to know.
Yeah, and it's also not necessarily a deal breaker. None of those are really deal breakers, right? Like, I still think you can sign with a publisher who's maybe the books you haven't loved in the past, and they can do a great job by your book. And like Jessica said earlier, if it's not a competitive situation, you might just find yourself taking the deal anyway. But it's something to have in mind and to consider, especially in terms of getting the most out of the relationship. So, when it is time for covers, you can say, hey, I did not love this cover, to your agent, and they can say, okay, and we can have that conversation. And the more communicative you are with your agent about your feelings about the reputation of the list, the better.
Right.
So another thing to consider is the author-editor working relationship. Again, probably leaning heavily on your agent, unless you've worked with this editor in the past. But for me, this is so important. Like, is the editor responsive? Is the editor someone who will take a lot of tracking down? All of these things are important. Is the editor someone who's collaborative? For us to know that, I usually like to have that in mind, especially when I'm making the submission. So is this someone who is going to respond quickly, and is that something my client highly values? Then I would put them on the submission list. But is this someone who we're gonna have to chase down, and that's something my client is not a fan of? I would probably not put them on that submission list.
But sometimes we don't have a choice.
Sometimes we don't have a choice.
Sometimes there is just that one editor or just the few editors at a publishing house, and it's like,
and they're perfect.
Really my one choice.
Yeah, sometimes their wish list is perfect, so we take the gamble, but it's also something that we're kind of negotiating in a way, at least with your agent and your editor, of like, this is how this person works. Is that something you're comfortable with? So, and on the flip side of that is enthusiasm. How excited are they? We've had it in the past where we've had this competitive situation, and there was a publisher coming in, and then there was a publisher coming in, and it was like, I need this. I want to slap it against my head. That says a lot.
Yeah. Oh, it says a lot, because if they're that enthusiastic to us, they're that enthusiastic to everybody in their publishing house. And let's face it, it's contagious.
Yeah. And, we talked about it earlier, but just because you have a high advance doesn't mean you're getting that. And having a team who's really keyed up about your book and ready to launch it into the market can go a long way, can make up for a lot of the advance being lower, perhaps. So it's something to keep in mind.
Absolutely.
So on the more deal side of things, outside of the advance, what rights are you keeping? So when we're selling a book to a publisher, everyone thinks we're just selling these physical books, but that's not the case. We're selling more than that. There's a pretty standard package of rights that we're discussing. That includes translation into different markets across the world. That includes English in different markets across the world, film rights, merchandising rights, audio rights, and so many more. Those are probably the big 5 that we're most actively negotiating for. That can make up for the advance. That could change the terms of the deal in a way that's really enticing. If your agency can retain translation, it could be a stronger deal than something that has a higher advance, but they're asking for translation.
But that depends again.
Right.
And that's something that we would be talking to our sub rights department about and say, okay, here's what I got going on. Do you think we can make up the difference versus maybe, if the author's on the fence between 2 publishers and the deals, it's coming down to that, we'll have that conversation to see where the best deal would be.
Yep.
And again, maybe some of the other things would trump it. Maybe you're saying, I'm willing to let the publisher handle my foreign rights just because I really love that editor, or I really feel in my gut that that's the right place, or that's my dream publisher, whatever it is.
Right. And also, if we are giving that up, what is their sub-rights department like? Have we worked with them in the past, and have they been majorly successful? We might be more inclined to let the publisher handle that for you. Or do we know that sub-rights department is not the best? We want to keep them. Those are things to keep in mind too.
Yep.
Our experience with that publisher, how they work, and what frankly, what their success rate is in certain departments.
Absolutely.
On the more logistical side of things, timeline, publication season, and then publication schedule. If it's a multiple book deal, are they looking to do a book a year? Are they looking to do this book in 3 years? What's your competitive works clause look like? Are they saying you can't publish elsewhere for a certain amount of time? Is there an option clause? All of those things are worth considering, because they might not be necessarily about the deal, but they are about the trajectory of your career when your books are hitting shelves and how you can start building momentum. So kind of looking a little towards the future, it's worth keeping that in mind. And also publication schedule and delivery schedule, that's all negotiable too.
It is. It's also not always contractual. So we can have the conversation, but they won't necessarily guarantee it, because there's a lot of variables there, but it is a conversation that's worth having.
Right. Okay. And the last thing on our list is, what is the marketing and publicity team department like? What is their
And the
reach?
sales team.
Yeah. And the sales
Like
team.
who's selling their book, whether if it's a small publisher, who's their distributor. And obviously with Big 5, we know they're presumably getting it into every place that we want it.
Yeah, and it's good to know, like, do they have a school and library focus? Are they really good in those markets? Are they good with award winners, right? There are some publishers who just seem to be on the award-winning list every year.
Yeah, no, that matters.
Yeah, are they more commercial? Do you always see their book in your local bookstores? Those are things to consider as well.
Whew, that's a lot.
It's a long list.
But please don't let this long list exhaust you. You'll work with your agent. It's not that complicated when you're actually negotiating the deal. It's just, these are sort of natural things that might be part of the conversation, but some of them might not be. Some of them we might not talk about the market reach we might not talk about the editor specifically. They're just parts of it. We just, whatever, it's not going to be a conversation.
And it might just come forward and it's like, yep, that checks out. And it's not a conversation. It's like, okay, they're publishing in a year. That's what we were hoping for. Or I like that editor. I know that editor. So some of this might not even be something you're thinking of. I guarantee you it's probably subconscious and you're either okay with it or else
Yeah.
you would have an issue. But these are the things that when we are receiving an offer, even when we're, soliciting that offer, that we have considered and that we will probably discuss with our clients when the
Mhm.
time comes. So I hope that was helpful. It was a lot. You might have to watch it a second time.
Yeah, it might be a repeater. It might be a save for when the time comes.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably going to go in our playlist for that reason. So don't forget to like and subscribe. And if there's anything we missed, let us know. But I think we were pretty thorough.
Pretty
So
thorough.
we'll see you back here next time.
Bye.